My name is Sarah Thompson, and I am 32 years old. If you had asked me 7 years ago where I thought I'd be today, I would have painted you a picture of a devoted Jehovah's Witness wife, raising children in the truth, spending my evenings preparing for meetings at the Kingdom Hall, and my weekends going door to door spreading the message I'd been taught since birth. I would have told you about my future in paradise, about surviving Armageddon, about the joy of serving Jehovah faithfully until the end. But life, as I've learned, rarely follows the script we're given. Today, I stand in a completely different world, one I built myself, brick by brick, after everything I knew crumbled around me. I work at a small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, surrounded by people who have become my chosen family. I have friendships based on genuine connection rather than religious obligation. I have freedom to think, to question, to grow, to simply be. But getting here? That journey nearly broke me. I grew up in a small town in rural Indiana, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the local diner serves as the community hub, and where church, or in my case, the Kingdom Hall, forms the center of social life. My parents, Michael and Linda Thompson, were both raised as Jehovah's Witnesses, though my father was actually a convert. He joined the organization in his early 20s after meeting my mother at a convention in Indianapolis. They were devout, sincere believers who genuinely thought they were giving their children the best possible life by raising us in the truth. We were 5 kids in total. I was the middle child with 2 older brothers, Daniel and Matthew, and 2 younger sisters, Rebecca and Emily. Our entire world revolved around the Kingdom Hall, the Watchtower publications, and the constant cycle of meetings, field service, and assemblies. My earliest memories are painted in the muted colors of Kingdom Hall carpeting and the smell of old books. I remember sitting on hard chairs 3 times a week, my legs swinging because they didn't reach the floor, trying desperately to stay awake during talks about prophecies and doctrines I couldn't understand. I remember the weight of my little meeting bag, stuffed with coloring books featuring children petting lions in paradise, and the way my mother would squeeze my hand when I fidgeted too much. Tuesday nights were book study at Brother Henderson's house. Thursdays brought the theocratic ministry school and service meeting. Sundays meant the public talk and Watchtower study. And Saturdays? Saturdays were for field service, knocking on strangers' doors, clutching magazines, reciting scripts I'd memorized before I could read them fluently. I was a good child. I wanted to please my parents, to make Jehovah happy, to be the kind of daughter the congregation could point to with pride. I gave my first talk at the ministry school when I was 8 years old, a 3-minute demonstration about how to start a Bible study with a householder. I remember wearing my best dress, the blue one with white flowers, and how my voice shook as I delivered my lines. Afterward, sisters crowded around to tell me how wonderful I'd done, how mature I was for my age, how surely I'd be a fine example for other young ones in the congregation. That praise felt good. It felt like love. Looking back now, I can see how carefully constructed my childhood reality was. We didn't celebrate birthdays or Christmas, which made me different from every other kid at school. We didn't salute the flag or participate in holiday activities. We couldn't have worldly friends. Those outside the organization were considered bad association that could corrupt our faith. Even my choice of toys was monitored. Anything related to magic, fantasy, or violence was forbidden. My best friend growing up was Jessica Martinez, another witness girl from our congregation. We spent countless hours together, at meetings, in field service, at congregation picnics and get-togethers. Her family and mine were close. Her parents and mine studied together, went to conventions together, supported each other through difficulties. Jessica and I would whisper and giggle during long assemblies, share our dreams of pioneering together after high school, and imagine our future paradise where we'd pet pandas and never grow old. We'll be pioneers together, Jessica told me once when we were 13, lying on her bedroom floor after a Saturday of field service. We'll auxiliary pioneer at first, then regular pioneer. Maybe we'll even get to go to Bethel someday. Or we could go where the need is great, I suggested, referencing the organization's encouragement to move to areas with few witnesses. Like another country. Wouldn't that be amazing? As long as we're serving Jehovah, Jessica said with complete certainty, it doesn't matter where we are. I envied her certainty. Even then, at 13, I had questions bubbling beneath the surface, questions I'd learned not to voice. The teenage years are difficult for everyone, but they're particularly complicated when you're a Jehovah's Witness. The organization taught us that adolescence was a dangerous time, when worldly influences could lead us astray, when desires of the flesh became a threat to our spirituality. We were constantly warned about the dangers of the world, from immoral entertainment to bad associations to independent thinking. That last one always struck me as odd, even as a teenager. Independent thinking was presented as dangerous, even prideful. We were taught that Jehovah provided everything we needed through his organization, and that questioning the governing body was tantamount to questioning God himself. But I couldn't help noticing things that didn't quite add up. I noticed how Sister Jenkins lived in constant fear that she wasn't doing enough. She pioneered 70 hours a month, attended every meeting, studied diligently, yet she always seemed anxious, always worried that Jehovah might find her lacking. I watched how Brother Anderson, one of our elders, could be warm and kind during meetings but harsh and judgmental in judicial committees. I saw how sisters like my mother worked tirelessly, cooking for gatherings, cleaning the kingdom hall, supporting their families. Yet were never allowed to give talks to the congregation or hold any position of real authority. And I saw how people were treated when they made mistakes. When I was 15, a girl named Amber Sutton, who was 17, got pregnant. The announcement came during a Tuesday night meeting. Amber Sutton is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. No explanation was given, none was needed. Everyone knew what it meant. She'd been disfellowshipped, cut off from the only community she'd ever known. From that moment on, no witness was supposed to speak to her beyond what was necessary. I remember seeing her at the grocery store a few weeks later. She looked devastated, her eyes red-rimmed, her shoulders hunched. She saw me, and for a moment, our eyes met. I saw such pain in her face, such loneliness. Every instinct told me to go to her, to give her a hug, to tell her it would be okay. But I didn't. I looked away and hurried past. That moment haunted me for years. "Mom," I asked that night at dinner, "why can't we talk to Amber anymore? She must be so sad." My mother's face tightened. "Sarah, Amber made her choice. The disfellowshipping arrangement is loving. It's meant to help her come to her senses and return to Jehovah. If we show her too much compassion, she won't feel the weight of her sin." "But she's alone," I pressed. "She's pregnant and alone. Isn't that cruel?" "Sarah," my father's voice was stern. "Jehovah's ways are not cruel. They're loving, even when we don't understand them. This is why we don't question the organization. Our limited human understanding can't grasp the wisdom of Jehovah's arrangements." I nodded and ate my dinner in silence. But inside, something shifted. For the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was something wrong with a system that isolated a scared, pregnant teenager in the name of love. High school was a minefield. I attended the local public school, but I was taught to remain separate from my classmates, to be in the world but not part of it, as the scripture said. I couldn't join clubs, couldn't go to dances, couldn't date. While my classmates talked about college plans, I was being groomed to become a regular pioneer, to devote my life to the organization rather than pursue selfish goals like higher education. The organization discouraged college, warning that it exposed young people to worldly philosophy and independent thinking. The end was so close, they said. Why waste time on 4 years of education when you could be using that time to serve Jehovah? My older brother Daniel had wanted to study engineering, but after countless meetings with the elders and pressure from our parents, he'd given up that dream and gone straight into full-time ministry after high school. I watched the light dim in his eyes as he gave up something he loved. But there was one teacher at my high school who made an impact on me, Mrs. Chun, my English literature teacher. She was kind, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in her students. She also noticed things. "Sarah," she said one day after class when I was 16, "you're an excellent writer. Have you thought about what you want to do after graduation?" "I'll probably pioneer," I said automatically, using the term without explanation. "Pioneer?" she asked, curious. "Like a missionary?" "Sort of. I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. We go door to door preaching." "I see." She paused thoughtfully. "You know, Sarah, you have real talent. You could write professionally, journalism, creative writing, academic research. Have you considered college?" I felt a familiar anxiety rise in my chest. My faith doesn't really encourage that. Mrs. Chen's expression was careful, respectful. "I understand that faith is important to you. I'm not trying to dissuade you from that. I just want you to know that you have options. Sometimes the best way to serve a cause you believe in is to develop your abilities fully. Just think about it." That conversation planted a seed. It was a small seed, barely visible, but it was there. Around the same time, I started experiencing what the organization called spiritual doubts. I found myself distracted during meetings, going through the motions of underlining my Watchtower, but not really absorbing the information. I noticed contradictions in the teachings, scriptures taken out of context, logical fallacies in the reasoning, predictions about the end that kept being revised when they didn't come true. I tried to suppress these thoughts. I prayed more, studied more, went out in field service more. I thought that if I just worked harder at being spiritual, these doubts would disappear. They didn't. Everything changed when I was 25. By then, I'd graduated high school and started auxiliary pioneering, devoting 50 hours a month to the preaching work. I worked part-time at a local bookstore to support myself, living at home with my parents while I focused on spiritual goals. Jessica had moved away to where the need was greater in Montana, and we'd drifted apart. My social circle consisted entirely of people from my congregation and neighboring congregations. One of my closest friends was Marcus Chun. Yes, he was the son of Mrs. Chun, my high school English teacher, though I didn't learn that connection until years later. Marcus had grown up as a witness. His father had converted when Marcus was young, and we'd become friends through circuit assemblies and regional conventions. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and deeply spiritual. We'd had countless conversations about doctrine, prophecy, and our hopes for the future paradise. Marcus was the kind of witness the organization loved to showcase. A young man who'd given up worldly ambitions to serve Jehovah, who was working toward becoming a ministerial servant, who gave excellent talks and comments at meetings. But Marcus had a curious mind. He asked questions. He wanted to understand not just what the organization taught, but why. I first noticed something was wrong when Marcus stopped commenting at meetings. Then he stopped giving talks. When I asked him about it, he was evasive. Just dealing with some personal stuff, Sarah. I'll be fine. But he wasn't fine. A few months later, the announcement came. Marcus Chun is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was stunned. Marcus? Disfellowshipped? It didn't make sense. He wasn't immoral. He didn't smoke, drink, or party. He hadn't committed any of the serious sins that usually led to disfellowshipping. What could he possibly have done? I found out through whispered conversations, the kind that happen in parking lots after meetings. Marcus had been asking questions about the organization's teachings. He'd done research, outside research, using non-witness sources. He'd questioned the accuracy of certain doctrines, particularly regarding the organization's changing teachings about the generation that would see Armageddon. When the elders met with him, he couldn't in good conscience say he believed everything the governing body taught. That was enough. He was disfellowshipped for apostasy, the worst possible label in witness culture. I was supposed to shun him. We all were. But I couldn't get past one question. What had Marcus learned that was so dangerous? What questions had he asked that warranted cutting him off completely? My curiosity, dormant for so long, roared back to life. I did something I'd been taught never to do. I reached out to Marcus through a secret email account I created. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to hit send. Marcus, it's Sarah. I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I need to understand what happened. You were one of the most spiritual people I knew. What changed? What did you find? He responded within hours. Sarah, I can't thank you enough for reaching out. I know the risk you're taking. I found something that changed everything. I found out that the organization's history isn't what we've been told. I learned that prophecies were taught predicted 1914 were actually made after 1914. I discovered that the governing body has changed major doctrines repeatedly, insisting each time that they speak for God. But if they spoke for God, why would he give them incorrect information? I learned about cases of child abuse covered up to protect the organization's reputation. I found out that the translation of our Bible has been altered in key places to support our unique doctrines. Sarah, I'm not telling you to leave. I'm not trying to apostatize you. But I couldn't live a lie. When I brought my concerns to the elders, they didn't want to discuss evidence or have a conversation. They wanted unquestioning obedience. I couldn't give them that. If you want to research this yourself, I can point you toward sources. But be careful. Really careful. If they even suspect you're questioning, you'll face what I faced. I stayed up all night reading that email. Then I did something terrifying. I started researching. The next year of my life was a psychological earthquake. I began carefully, secretly researching the organization's history and teachings using non-witness sources. I created separate email accounts. I used incognito browsing. I told no one what I was doing. What I found shattered my worldview. I learned about the organization's failed prophecies. 1914, 1925, 1975. Dates when Armageddon was supposed to come that were later explained away or quietly forgotten. I read the testimonies of former members who described the same controlling behaviors I'd experienced, but had been taught to see as loving. I found documentation of policy changes that had caused real harm, like the previous ban on organ transplants, later reversed, or the rules about blood fractions that had evolved over time, meaning people had died refusing treatments that were later deemed acceptable. I discovered the organization's policy regarding child sexual abuse allegations, requiring 2 witnesses to the abuse before taking action, which effectively protected abusers and silenced victims. I read heartbreaking stories from survivors whose pain was ignored or minimized to protect the organization's reputation. I examined the New World Translation, our Bible, and compared it with other translations and original language texts. I found places where key verses had been altered, subtle changes that supported witness doctrine but weren't supported by the original Greek or Hebrew. Every discovery was like pulling a thread that unraveled more of the fabric I'd believed was unshakable truth. The psychological toll was immense. This wasn't just about changing my religion. It was about realizing that everything I'd built my identity on was flawed. My entire moral framework, my understanding of reality, my relationships, my purpose, all of it was tied to an organization that, I was realizing, didn't deserve my unquestioning loyalty. I went through stages of grief. Denial first. Surely there were explanations for these things. Surely I was misunderstanding. Then anger. How could they lie to us? How could they claim to speak for God while causing so much harm? Then bargaining. Maybe I could stay and just quietly disagree. Maybe I could reform things from the inside. But eventually I hit acceptance. I couldn't stay. Not with integrity. Making the decision to leave was agonizing. I knew exactly what it would cost me. My family. My friends. My community. My identity. Everything. I was 29 years old when I finally admitted to myself that I no longer believed the Jehovah's Witnesses had the truth. But admitting it to myself and acting on it were different things. I spent months in a kind of limbo, going through the motions while dying inside. I attended meetings, but felt like I was watching from outside my own body. I went in field service, but couldn't bring myself to actually try to convert anyone. I'd offer magazines half-heartedly and feel relieved when people said no. I smiled and nodded during conversations about the truth, while screaming internally. It was Marcus who finally pushed me to act. We'd been corresponding secretly for months by then, and he could see I was torturing myself. "Sarah," he wrote, "you can't live this double life indefinitely. It's destroying you. I know you're scared, I was too. But there's life after the organization. Real life. Authentic life. You deserve that." He was right. I knew he was right. I decided not to fade away quietly. I couldn't. I needed to be honest, even though honesty would have consequences. I requested a meeting with the elders and told them I no longer believed the organization was God's sole channel of truth. I explained some of my concerns, carefully, because I didn't want to be labeled an apostate immediately, though I knew that label was coming. The meeting was exactly as painful as I'd feared. 3 elders, brothers Jackson, Morrison, and Lee, sat across from me in a small room at the Kingdom Hall. Their faces were grave. "Sister Thompson," Brother Jackson began, "we're concerned about what you're telling us. These doubts you're expressing, they sound like apostate thinking. Where are you getting this information?" "I've been researching," I said simply. "Comparing what we're taught with historical facts, with the Bible itself." "Using what sources?" Brother Morrison's voice was sharp. "Apostate websites? Material designed to stumble faithful ones. Does it matter where truth comes from?" I asked. "If something is true, shouldn't we want to know it?" "The truth comes from Jehovah's organization," Brother Lee said firmly. "Anything else is from Satan, designed to deceive us." We went in circles for 2 hours. They didn't want to discuss evidence or address my concerns. They wanted me to renounce my doubts and submit to the organization's authority. When it became clear I wouldn't do that, they moved toward disfellowshipping. "If you continue down this path," Brother Jackson said gravely, "you'll be disfellowshipped. Do you understand what that means? Your family won't speak to you. Your friends will shun you. You'll lose your relationship with Jehovah." "I understand," I said quietly. "But I can't lie about what I believe. I can't pretend anymore." The announcement came the following Tuesday. Sarah Thompson is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And just like that, my entire world ended. The months after my disfellowshipping were the darkest of my life. My parents told me I was no longer welcome in their home unless I came to my senses and returned to the organization. My siblings stopped talking to me, all except Rebecca, my younger sister, who sent me one secret text: "I love you. I don't understand, but I love you." Then she blocked my number, presumably out of fear. Friends I'd known my entire life walked past me in public, as if I didn't exist. Jessica, when I tried to reach out, sent a brief response. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't have contact with you. I hope you'll return to Jehovah soon." I was utterly, completely alone. I also had to rebuild my entire life from scratch. I'd been living at home, working part-time, with all my social connections through the organization. Now I needed a full-time job, a place to live, and somehow, someway, I needed to figure out how to build a life outside the only community I'd ever known. I found a cheap studio apartment in Portland, Oregon, a city far enough from my hometown that I wouldn't constantly run into people from my former life. I got a full-time job as a barista at a small coffee shop called The Daily Grind. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to cover rent and food. Those first months, I was barely surviving. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, and lie in bed staring at the ceiling. I felt like I'd been dropped into a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. Everything normal people took for granted, casual friendships, making small talk, understanding cultural references, was foreign to me. I didn't know how to connect with people who hadn't grown up in my bubble. I didn't know what movies or TV shows people my age talked about because I'd been discouraged from watching them. I'd never been to a bar or a nightclub. I'd never celebrated a birthday or holiday. I felt like an alien trying to pass as human. The loneliness was crushing. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. There were moments I almost went back, almost called the elders and told them I'd been wrong, just to have my family and friends back. But then I'd remember Marcus's words: real life, authentic life. And I'd remember Amber, pregnant and alone, shunned for making a mistake. And I'd remember all the questions I'd had, all the inconsistencies I'd noticed, all the harm I'd seen justified in the name of love. And I'd stay away. The turning point came about 6 months after I'd moved to Portland. I was making coffee one morning when a regular customer, an older woman named Margaret, noticed I seemed down. "Rough morning?" she asked kindly. "Rough life," I said before I could stop myself. Then I apologized. "Sorry. That was unprofessional." "Nonsense," Margaret said warmly. "We're all human. I'm sorry you're having a hard time." Something about her genuine compassion, no judgment, no ulterior motive, just simple human kindness, broke something open in me. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. About growing up as a witness, about leaving, about losing everyone I loved. She listened to the whole story, then said something I'll never forget. "Sarah, what you've been through is called religious trauma. It's real, it's valid, and there are people who understand. Have you thought about finding a therapist who specializes in this?" I hadn't. I'd barely known that was possible. Margaret helped me find Dr. Patricia Williams, a therapist who worked with former members of high-control religious groups. Starting therapy was like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for 30 years. "You're not crazy," Dr. Williams told me in our first session. "Everything you're feeling, the grief, the anger, the confusion, the guilt, it's all normal. You've been through something traumatic. You lost everything. And that's not your fault." Hearing those words, "not your fault," made me cry harder than I had in months. Over the next year, Dr. Williams helped me understand what I'd experienced. She taught me about thought reform, undue influence, and how high-control groups shape identity. She helped me work through the guilt, the feeling that I'd abandoned God, betrayed my family, made a selfish choice. She helped me see that leaving wasn't betrayal, it was self-preservation. "You had the courage to choose authenticity over comfort," she told me. "That's not selfishness. That's integrity." Therapy gave me tools to process my trauma. But it was the coffee shop that gave me community. The Daily Grind was owned by a man named Tom Harrison, a laid-back guy in his 50s who'd opened the shop 20 years earlier as a place for community connection. He hired an eclectic mix of people: artists, students, recovering addicts, immigrants, ex-religious folks like me. He created a culture of acceptance and genuine care. My co-workers became my first real friends outside the organization. There was Luis, a gay man who'd been kicked out of his Catholic family at 18 and had built a life of art and activism. There was Keisha, a single mom working her way through nursing school. There was David, a recovering alcoholic who'd been sober for 5 years and counting. And there was Mira, a refugee from Syria who'd lost everything in the war and was rebuilding her life one day at a time. We were all broken in different ways. And somehow, that made us perfect for each other. Luis was the first person I really opened up to. He'd noticed my discomfort when he talked about his boyfriend, and one day after our shift, he asked me directly, "Did you grow up in some kind of religious group? You seem uncomfortable with certain topics." I told him my story. He listened without judgment, then shared his own. How he'd been told he was an abomination, how he'd contemplated suicide at 16, how he'd eventually learned that his identity wasn't something to be ashamed of. The people who reject us for being authentic, Luis said, they're the ones with the problem, not us. You're not broken, Sarah. You're brave. Slowly, so slowly, I started to heal. I started to discover who I was outside the organization's identity. I found out I loved live music, something I'd been taught was worldly and dangerous. I discovered I was actually good at painting, a hobby I took up on Luis's encouragement. I read voraciously, all the books I'd been discouraged from reading, from Harry Potter to The God Delusion to memoirs by other ex-religious people. I celebrated my first birthday at age 30. My coffee shop friends threw me a surprise party, complete with cake, candles, and ridiculous hats. I cried through the whole thing, partly from joy, partly from grief for all the birthdays I'd missed. This is what life should be, Keisha said, hugging me. Celebrating the people we love, just because. Just because. Not because they met certain standards. Not because they believed the right things. Just because they existed and mattered. It was revolutionary. As I healed, I started to rebuild my sense of self. This was harder than it sounds. When you grow up in a high-control group, your identity is shaped entirely by the group's expectations. You don't develop your own preferences, opinions, and values. You adopt the group's. I had to learn from scratch what I actually believed about life, morality, purpose, and meaning. I discovered I wasn't actually atheist. I still felt connected to something bigger than myself, though I no longer believed in the Jehovah's Witnesses' version of God. I explored different spiritual perspectives, reading about Buddhism, Quaker philosophy, secular humanism. I didn't land anywhere specific, and I learned that was okay. I didn't need all the answers. I figured out my values: authenticity, compassion, justice, freedom of thought, human connection. These had always been my core values, I realized, but the organization had labeled them as weakness or worldliness. I started understanding my own needs and boundaries. I learned it was okay to say no. I learned that disagreement didn't equal betrayal. I learned that questions weren't signs of weak faith. They were signs of an engaged mind. And I discovered something profound. Community didn't require conformity. The richest relationships I was building were with people who were vastly different from me. Luis and I disagreed about politics. Keisha and I had different spiritual beliefs. David and I had different life experiences. But we genuinely cared about each other. We showed up for each other. We celebrated differences rather than demanding uniformity. This was so different from the conditional love I'd known in the organization, where acceptance was contingent on adherence to rules and doctrines. One evening, about 2 years after I'd left, I was closing the coffee shop with Luis when he asked, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving, I mean." I thought about it honestly. I regret the pain it caused. I regret losing my family. I regret that I didn't know them well enough to know if any of them might have understood. But do I regret leaving? No. I couldn't have stayed without losing myself completely. Do you miss it? Any of it? Sometimes, I admitted. I miss the certainty. I miss believing I had all the answers. I miss the simplicity of having every aspect of my life mapped out. But mostly, I miss who I thought my family was. I miss the illusion of unconditional love. But now you have the reality of it, Luis said. With us. With your chosen family. He was right. I did. About 3 years after I'd been disfellowshipped, I got an unexpected call from Rebecca, my younger sister. She was 26, and she was calling from a phone number I didn't recognize. "Sarah," her voice was shaking. "It's me. Please don't hang up." My heart nearly stopped. "Rebecca? Are you okay?" She took a deep breath. "I'm leaving. The organization. I can't do it anymore. And I don't know what to do or where to go, and you're the only person I could think of who might understand." I flew back to Indiana the next day. Rebecca's story was similar to mine, but with its own unique pain. She'd started questioning after seeing how our parents had treated me. How people who claimed to love unconditionally had cut off their own daughter completely. She'd started secretly researching, and everything I'd discovered, she discovered too. But unlike me, Rebecca had tried to fade quietly. She'd stopped commenting at meetings, reduced her field service hours, made excuses to avoid congregation gatherings. The elders had noticed and started pressing her. When they'd called her in for a meeting, she'd panicked and told them the truth. She didn't believe anymore. She'd been disfellowshipped that same night. Our parents had told her she had 1 week to get out of their house. They didn't even cry, Rebecca said as we sat in my old childhood bedroom, helping her pack her things. Mom just looked at me like I was already dead, like I'd already stopped existing. I held my sister as she sobbed, and I felt all my old anger and pain resurface. But I also felt something else, gratitude that she wouldn't have to do this alone like I had. Rebecca moved to Portland with me. She got a job at a nearby restaurant and started her own therapy with Dr. Williams. We healed together, processed our trauma together, and built new lives together. Having Rebecca back was bittersweet. I'd gained my sister, but our brothers and our other sister, Emily, still wouldn't speak to us. Our parents sent Rebecca a letter telling her that she'd be welcome back if she repented and returned to Jehovah. Otherwise, they had no daughter named Rebecca. We mourned together the family we'd lost. But we also celebrated the family we were becoming. For years after I'd left, Marcus came back into my life, this time in person. He'd moved to Portland for work and had looked me up through the secret email we'd used years ago. Meeting him for coffee, ironically, at the Daily Grind, was surreal. He'd been my lifeline in those dark early days, but we'd never actually met face-to-face as people outside the organization. "You look good," he said, smiling. "Happier than in your profile picture." "I am happier," I realized as I said it. It took a long time, but I'm actually happy. We spent hours catching up. Marcus had gone back to school, gotten his degree in computer science, and was now working as a software developer. He'd found a community of ex-witnesses online and had even started dating, something we'd both been taught to do only with the goal of marriage and only with fellow believers. "Sometimes I still feel guilty," he admitted. "Like I'm waiting for Armageddon to prove I was wrong." "Do you ever feel that?" "Less and less," I said. Therapy helped, but also just living. Every day I live authentically, every connection I make based on genuine friendship rather than religious obligation, every moment of joy I experience that I was taught was worldly. It all reinforces that I made the right choice. "Do you believe in anything now?" he asked. "Spiritually, I mean." "I believe in human goodness," I said. "I believe in kindness and connection. I believe we create meaning through our choices and our relationships. I don't know if there's a God or an afterlife, and I'm okay with not knowing. The mystery doesn't scare me anymore." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'm still figuring out what I believe. But I know what I don't believe. I don't believe any human organization has a monopoly on truth or God or morality." We became close friends. He integrated into my coffee shop community, started dating Luis's friend Alex, and became another member of my chosen family. Now, at 32, I can look back on my journey with perspective I didn't have in the midst of it. Leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses was the hardest thing I've ever done. The grief was profound. I lost my family, my identity, my community, my sense of certainty about the world. There were moments I didn't think I'd survive it. But I did survive it. And more than that, I've thrived. My life today is full in ways I couldn't have imagined when I was sitting in the Kingdom Hall, feeling like I was suffocating. I have genuine friendships based on mutual care rather than shared beliefs. I have the freedom to think, question, grow, and change my mind. I have the joy of discovery, of art, music, literature, ideas, experiences, without filtering everything through the organization's narrow lens. I still work at the Daily Grind, though I've been promoted to assistant manager. Tom has become a mentor and father figure to me. My coworkers are my family. We show up for each other's birthdays, which I now celebrate enthusiastically. We support each other through breakups and health scares and family drama. We laugh together and cry together and simply exist together. Rebecca is thriving too. She's in a serious relationship with a wonderful woman named Diana, something that would have been impossible in our old life. She's going to community college, studying social work with the goal of helping at-risk youth. She's found her calling in helping others who've been marginalized or rejected. I've started writing, something Mrs. Chen would be proud of. I write essays about religious trauma and recovery. I've connected with other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses online, and knowing I'm not alone in this experience has been incredibly healing. I've even spoken at a few conferences about life after high control groups. Last month, I painted my first mural on the back wall of the Daily Grind. It shows a bird escaping from a cage, flying toward a sunrise. Tom insisted I sign it, so in the corner, in small letters, it says Sarah Thompson, 2025. It's my declaration. I was here. I survived. I flew. People sometimes ask me if I forgive the organization, if I forgive my parents, if I forgive the people who shunned me. It's complicated. I understand that most Jehovah's Witnesses, including my parents, genuinely believe they're doing what's right. They think they're serving God, protecting their children, following the path to salvation. They're as trapped in the system as I was, and many of them are too afraid or too conditioned to question it. But understanding doesn't erase harm. My parents chose their religion over their daughters. They looked at Rebecca and me, their children whom they'd raised and supposedly loved, and decided we were disposable. That's a choice they made, and no amount of they thought it was right changes the pain of that rejection. So do I forgive them? I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. What I have done is accept that they may never change, may never reach out, may never acknowledge the harm they caused. I've had to grieve the parents I thought I had and accept the parents I actually have. And I've had to build a life that doesn't depend on their approval or presence. As for the organization itself, I don't forgive it. High control groups that manipulate vulnerable people, that split families apart, that cover up abuse, that instill fear and guilt as control mechanisms, that crush individual thought and identity. These systems don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve to be exposed, opposed, and dismantled. But I don't carry hatred. Hatred would give them power over me, and I won't give them that. Instead, I carry determination to live well, to help others who are escaping, to speak truth about what these systems do to people. My freedom is my revenge. My joy is my resistance. My authentic life is my victory. If you're reading this and you're still in the organization but questioning, I want you to know, your doubts are valid. Your questions are reasonable. Your desire for authenticity is not selfish or wicked. It's terrifying to consider leaving. I know. You're not just leaving a religion, you're potentially losing everyone you love. You're stepping into complete uncertainty. The fear is overwhelming. But I also want you to know, there is life after the organization. Real, rich, beautiful life. There are people out here who will accept you, who will love you for who you actually are, not who you're supposed to be. There are communities that will embrace you without demanding conformity. Will it be easy? No. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. But will it be worth it? Yes. 1,000 times yes. You deserve to live authentically. You deserve to think freely. You deserve relationships based on genuine connection, not fear of shunning. You deserve to celebrate birthdays and holidays and life itself without guilt. You deserve to ask questions without being labeled apostate. You deserve to be yourself. And if you leave, you won't be alone. There are thousands of us out here, ex-witnesses, ex-Mormons, ex-evangelical, people who've escaped all kinds of high-control groups. We've built networks and communities. We've created resources and support systems. We're here, and we're waiting to welcome you with open arms. The journey is hard, but you are harder. I used to recite the beliefs of the Jehovah's Witnesses, about paradise, about Armageddon, about being part of God's chosen people. Now, I have a different creed. I believe in questions without easy answers. I believe in growth over certainty. I believe in compassion over judgment. I believe in chosen family as much as biological family. I believe in second chances, third chances, infinite chances. I believe in celebrating life, every moment of it, every person in it. I believe in art and music and literature and ideas. I believe in the courage it takes to be authentic. I believe in the beauty of diversity, of different perspectives, of people who think differently than I do. I believe in my own capacity to figure things out, to make mistakes, to learn, to change my mind. I believe that meaning is made, not given, that we create purpose through our choices and connections. And I believe that love, real love, is unconditional. It doesn't demand conformity. It doesn't threaten abandonment. It doesn't manipulate through fear. Real love says, I see you, all of you, and I'm here regardless. That's the kind of love I've found in this new life. And that's the kind of love I try to give back. Every morning, I wake up in my small apartment in Portland. I make coffee, good coffee, the kind I've learned to appreciate through years of working at the daily grind. I look at the art on my walls, paintings I've done and pieces my friends have given me. I check my phone and see messages from Rebecca, from Marcus, from Luis and Keisha and David and Mira. Then I head to work, where I'll spend the day making drinks, chatting with regulars, laughing with my coworkers, and being exactly who I am without fear or pretense. It's a simple life. Not what I was raised to expect. No paradise, no perfect future, no divine purpose handed down from above. But it's mine. Really, truly mine. And it's beautiful. The girl who sat in the Kingdom Hall, swinging her legs and coloring pictures of paradise, couldn't have imagined this life. She would have been scared of it, taught that it was dangerous and worldly and empty. But the woman I am now? She knows better. This life, messy, uncertain, beautifully imperfect, is full of more genuine love, more real joy, more authentic connection than I ever experienced in 30 years of the truth. I've gone from the Kingdom Hall to the coffee shop, from unquestioning obedience to curious exploration, from conditional love to chosen family, from a narrow, prescribed path to wide-open possibility. And I've learned the most important truth of all. I don't need an organization to tell me how to live. I don't need a prophet to interpret reality for me. I don't need a promise of paradise to make life meaningful. I just need to be present, to be authentic, to be kind, and to keep showing up, for myself, for the people I love, for this strange and wonderful life. That's my new creed. That's my new truth. And it's enough. More than enough. It's everything.